So it's a great time to actually have you as a Blackhawks supporter as well, because Jeff Blashill just got hired. Can you tell me a little bit about him and what you think the Blackhawks are getting?
Yeah, I can. And I think that it's the right coach at the right time. And I know when you look at the Blackhawks, and I'm sorry for Blackhawks fans, this team's not ready to win yet. They're not ready to make that push into the playoffs, make a Stanley Cup playoff push. They know it. The players know it. Staff knows it. Management knows it. I think it's the fans that are last to accept those kind of things. And Jeff Blashill's a coach that can teach. He's a guy that comes from college, meaning he coached a lot in college, and that's a teaching league. I mean, you get 4 days to practice a week. You spend a lot of time on practice ice. You spend a lot of time on video, and so he's got that background in him. So I think he's really good at developing. I think he's a really good teacher. He's a great communicator, and most importantly, guys that play under him or know him on a staff and work with him like him. Yeah, and I'll tell you this, for a team like Chicago Blackhawks that are going to struggle for wins, and again, I'm sorry to say that, I've been in those atmospheres because I worked for Arizona for over 20 years. So I'm used to being in a situation where you're going to lose. It can't be miserable at the same time. It can't be a hard place to go to work. It can't be very dark black cloud around the coach's room, the locker room. And I think Jeff Blashill will understand his mission, and that's to just create a good atmosphere where guys are happy to go to the rink. And I think I truly do think he's the right coach at the right time.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. I know a lot of fans are a little worrisome about what the direction of the Blackhawks are going, but we have players like Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, Lev Shinov, and Sam Renzel. I'm not sure if you have taken a look at a lot of the Blackhawks games recently because they're not the best team. But can you tell me a little bit about Connor Bedard and the ceiling that the Blackhawks have and when you think they can end up being in contention?
Yeah, and you know what? This is a team I really like, and they're early in the process though, and you have to look at other teams that are in that process or went through that process. You look at the Ottawa Senators and how long it took them for their young players to finally become the Brady Kachuk that he is now, and you got Dylan Cousins, and you got these young players there, but it took them a while. And you look at Utah, and I liken them to Utah too, in that they drafted from within. They got these young players and this young core, but it's going to take them time. I really like the Chicago Blackhawks, and I like their forward group. I mean, Connor Bedard's an outstanding player. I do think Connor Bedard needs people to play with him. I don't know if he's had the right accompaniment of players around him to make him better. He's a guy that can't do it by himself. He's not Connor McDavid. He's not Nathan McKinnon. He can't go 200 feet by himself. He needs to make the plays for other players, and he hasn't had that other player yet. I think they're coming, but I love this back end. When you look at the back end of the Chicago Blackhawks and how young this defensive core is and this defensive group, like Vlasic to me is going to be an outstanding defenseman. You've got Sam Renzel, Wyatt Kaiser, Louis Crevier, and you go to the guys that were sent down at the end. You talked about Levshunov, Korchinski, Del Mastro, Allen. Like this D core, they have so many talented young defensemen. They're going to have to move somebody. And that's a luxury where Chicago is. Honestly, I would expect over the next 6 months, 2 months. Don't be surprised if one of those young defensemen has to leave this Chicago Blackhawk group because they've just got too many guys back there on the back end. So, to answer your question, Anthony, the future's bright. The young players they have up front have speed, have skill, have talent, but it just takes time. They've got to learn how to play in the National Hockey League. They've got to lose some of those junior habits, those young habits they've had then, and they got to get stronger. And so I think it is going to take a couple of years. I don't think this team is a playoff team this year. I don't think it's a playoff team next year. But the year after that, they're a team that should be competing for a playoff spot in the Western Conference.
And to bring up to your point, Connor Bedard needs a line mate or a peer. Do you think Mitch Marner would be the right play for the Blackhawks?
I don't. And again, I think there's people. Fans want the shiny new toy, and the biggest guy on the market right now is Mitch Marner. But Mitch Marner, one, has got to fit somewhere. And you looked at his fit with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a puck distributor. He can make great plays. He makes those little plays that makes the people around him better. And I don't think Chicago's ready for that yet. I think you need Mitch Marner when you're ready to take the next step for a team that's just about there, for a team that might be winning a Stanley Cup. I'm looking at teams like Vegas and Tampa and the big market teams that are just about there. I don't think Marner's a great fit. Now, will they take a swing at him? I think there's a lot of teams that are going to take a swing at Marner. And if Marner wants to go to Chicago and be there and help the core, I think the Chicago Blackhawks management would be thrilled to have Mitch Marner helping distribute the puck to Connor Bedard and hopefully Ryan Donato in the next season.
Yeah.
I just don't see it from the outside looking in. When you're in that and you want that big player signed with your team because that's the guy that'll get you there. I don't think Marner's enough, and I don't think Marner's there at the right time. So I don't think Marner ends up as a Chicago Blackhawk.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans, like you said, want the shiny toy, but Marner is 180 pounds. Kind of not the best fit for the Connor Bedard line with Frank Nazar. These players are they're under 200 pounds and they are on the smaller end. So that's a really good point. Uh, Marner to the Knights would scare me. So when
Yeah.
you said that, it kind of gave me goosebumps a little bit because I could definitely see that going on. But to talk about one of the assistants, Kevin Dean was just let go by the Blackhawks, and obviously he's going to have a lot of suitors. But one of the assistants that we just signed was Michael Pekka from the Rangers. I'm not sure if I said his last name correct. I need to do
You
some
did.
research on that. Okay, sweet, sweet. Look at that. Um, do you can I get your opinion on Michael Pekka and what you see he will bring with the Blackhawks?
Yeah, I think this is a good choice right now for a staff. And again, I'm talking about guys. You've got to have a staff that understands the game, but they're also guys that are relationship builders and guys that can help show guys the right way. And Michael Pekka is a guy that, with you look at his career in the National Hockey League. I mean, the guy played almost 900 games in the National Hockey League. He played the right way. He worked hard. And you know what? Honestly, he was a slight guy. He was a small guy that competed incredibly hard. Well, guess what the Chicago Blackhawks have? A lot of small guys that they need to compete really hard. And one of the things you need to have, if you don't have those veteran players, and I think Foligno is one of those guys, I think Donato is one of those guys that can help be that veteran presence in the room. You also need a coach that's been there and done that and go, hey, yeah, I've had problems getting the puck off of the wall and trying to get to the middle of the ice before. I know what you're talking about. Here's what you can do. I think it's a great hire. I think he's been around enough organizations now, and he's a guy that's been in the playoffs. He's seen enough that I think he is going to be a guy that's really going to help this staff. He's an experienced guy, and players want guys that have been there before. And I tell you what, Connor Bedard can look at him and go, okay, he's played in the league. He's 900 games. Like, okay, I can listen to this guy. So I think it's a great voice to add to a room that I think is going to be a fun room to be a part of next season.
Great point. Great point. And to go to your point on some of the people that we have hired, it's a lot about people that have developed prospects. So how do you balance coaching to win versus coaching to develop players?
It's hard because you look at coaching staffs and coaches are graded on winning. I mean, it's wins and losses league. And if you don't win, you're out. And so you have to have that understanding with management. I think that's first and foremost with the coaching staff, that you have to understand that, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs. And I don't mean in a negative way. This is the team we have. And we're trying to dethrone teams like the Edmonton Oilers and the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. We're not there yet in the Western Conference. We cannot compete with those teams now. So I think that the understanding from the coaching staff has to be, it has to be little wins, and it has to be, it has to set realistic goals. If you go in there and you get angry and mad every time you lose a game, it's going to be awful. It's going to be horrible to be around that. You don't want to go to practice. You don't want to be at the rink. So what you have to do is you have to set goals that are reasonable. And I mean small goals. Hey, we're playing San Jose tonight, our power play. Let's really focus on our power play. That's something we're going to work on today, this week in practice. We're going to focus on one thing, and we're going to do one thing well. Let's be good on the power play. Even if we lose the game, if our power play created chances and was a positive force in this game, that's great. Tomorrow, let's work a little bit on our neutral zone. We're going to really take pride in stopping the rush against the Seattle Kraken. We're going to defend the blue lines. And then even if you lose the game, you say, hey, our rush chances were down in this game versus last game. I think that really helps as you set realistic goals. As far as developing, the hard part is you got to give these guys ice time. You have to let them play, and you have to let them play and make some mistakes, but you have to put them in a structure that you want them to play in. And what I mean by that is you get the Edmonton Oilers that had four first overall draft picks, and they learned how to lose because they didn't play the right way. They played selfish. They played offensively. They didn't play within a structure of a system. And with Connor Bedard, the fear is, hey, it gets easier to lose the more often you lose, and you don't want to build losers. So I think
Mhm.
you have to put the structure in place, and I know that Blashill will have that structure, meaning he'll have offensive zone systems, defensive zone systems. You put the systems in place to give the players a chance to succeed, but you make sure those players are playing within that system. So by the time you're ready to win, they know how to defend. They know where they're supposed to be when the puck goes to the weak side. They know how to use a stick when they're going one-on-one with a player into the corner. So I think those little details and building that system structure will help develop those players so when they're ready to win, they have the foundation.
Yeah, building those habits is really important. I think that people wanted David Carl because he could have potentially been a culture changer for whoever team he went to. Even the Hawks, I know there were so many teams that wanted him. Obviously, Denver got the golden ticket there, but uh, like when you're watching Kevin Korchinski or somebody that really kind of is on the outside looking in for the Blackhawks prospect pool because there's so many prospects in this pool. I think that like somebody like Blashill can help develop. Do you think with Kevin Korchinski that he will reach his upside, or is he going to be one of those players you were talking to that might be on the outside looking in?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy because he was the guy. He was the guy since he was drafted. He's the next up and coming guy, and he's had a couple kicks at the can. He's been up, he's been called up, he's got the ice time, and he continues to be a different player in the minors than he is in the National Hockey League, which isn't uncommon for a young player. Yeah, I think the ceiling on this guy is high. I do think Kevin Korchinski is going to be an everyday, regular NHL defenseman and a good player. But to your point, Anthony, that's exactly the kind of player that I think might not end up a Blackhawk. I do think that he is coveted enough around the league, and people still want to see what he can do. And not saying he can't play for the Chicago Blackhawks and he can't be successful there, but I think he's behind some other guys right now. And I think it's a situation where you've got so many defensemen that he might be the odd man out. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him being one of the players that moves out.
Yeah, like players like Vlasic and Rinzel. I know he's on the right side, but Rinzel, they took massive jumps. So it kind of helped push Korchin. I mean, it didn't help Korchinski, but it pushed Korchinski down the totem pole there. So that really is interesting because I brought up a point on a Chicago hockey show that it kind of a lot of people were talking about that. I said if we got a top 15 pick, would we trade Korchinski this year? Just because you get that asset, you get a contract reset. It's just a reset of a prospect, and it was kind of split between would you want a player like Carter Bear or Malcolm Spence. But with this kind of draft, I know the Stanley Cup playoffs are going on and everything, but we have the third overall pick, and we have a lot of ammo to we have 12 picks in the first two rounds and in the next 3 years. So do you see the Blackhawks trading for a superstar to try to get a Connor Bedard, a buddy, or do you think it'll happen like in the next 2 years of free agency?
Yeah, I don't think it's this year. I just, and I know you're the prospect guy, you know your prospect pool much better than I do. I think the Chicago Blackhawks are thrilled with the third overall pick. I do not see them any chance of them trading up to get this pick in this year's draft.
Hmm.
Next year, maybe. And I think that when you look at drafts, it's always it's guessing. It is guessing. That's the good draft. This is the bad draft. This is the deep draft for defense. This is the deep draft for center. Honestly, you don't know until 10 years back, and you go
Yeah.
back and look in hindsight. It's really difficult to do that. But unless the Chicago Blackhawks, when you're trading away assets to move up when you're at third, you better be right. And I go back again to the Arizona Coyotes when they picked third and took Dylan Strome. The two guys above them were Eichel and McDavid. Well, yeah, the big two were important that year. That was life-changing picks. I'm not sure this year is that year. I'm not sure this is a Celebrini. I'm not sure that this is a Bedard season. This might be more of a Shane Wright season. And so then I don't think you need to take the big swing and just hold those draft picks.
Hmm.
I don't have a problem trading the draft picks. I don't have a problem moving up even into different rounds. Trade a third to get into a second because I do think those little moves can make a huge difference. Or package some of those to get a player right now. That might even be more important. for Chicago
Yeah.
because I do think you need the guys. I think you need I said Donato already, and he's not signed yet, and he's a
Mhm.
guy that's a guy you need. Foligno, you need those kind of NHL veteran guys to help lead these guys, and I don't mean they have to be great players; they have to be great pros. And now is an opportunity where you can take a third round pick or a fourth round pick, and you might be able to bundle some in to get a guy that can play right now next season up front.
That's a great answer. You are a hockey encyclopedia. I absolutely love this. So like t speaking about the draft because it's so important, and I know this is going to be the first NHL draft that there isn't the GMs and everybody on the floor. Can you take me through like an NHL draft as a coach and what goes into it? Is there a lot of film? Are you with the GM also studying some film and having some say?
Yeah, it's funny. It's very different getting ready for the draft. And I will say this earlier when I was the video coach in Arizona, earlier in my career, I was more involved because there was less staff. As years wore on, and where these staffs are today in these 32 teams, is the coaching staff and the amateur drafting staff are very separate, and they have their own infrastructure of video guys, and they have their own infrastructure of coordinators that are coordinating all this data and putting out all this statistical information. And the boots on the ground guys are really what get the work done in the amateur draft. Now, having said that, do the coaches get involved at any level? Yeah, and the coaches get involved to the point where what do you need as a coach? What kind of players are you looking for? What kind of style do you want to play? And they may not make the decisions for the amateur scouts, but they'll bring that into account. Like if Rick Tockett's your coach, and I want a player that can play hard along the wall. I want a guy that's going to be a 200-foot player that can not just be flashy, but can defend and be a little bit bigger body. Well, maybe you've got a choice between player A and player B. We need a Rick Tocchet kind of player. And I think that's where the coaching staff gets more involved because the truth is, with a head coach in the National Hockey League, they're busy and they're busy day to day. And even now that the playoffs are over, they don't know these players. They haven't seen them. They might be able to make a phone call and talk to the coach or the people surrounding that organization where you might draft a player. But the amateur scouting staff, they're the ones that know those players. They've seen them with their own eyes. They've been to the arenas. They've talked to the coaches, the managers, the families. They know the players. So when it gets to the draft floor, it's the show of the amateur scouts. Even the general manager who has the hammer and gets the final say, it's still the amateur scouts that are literally fighting for their guy at a table. Like, this is my guy. I'm a Western Canadian scout. This is my guy. And he'll be going against the USHL scout going, no, this is my guy. And you see those battles taking place on that draft week, coming right up to that pick.
Wow. So say, you know how like the NFL, it's 23, 24-year-olds. So the coaches have probably a little more say. These guys are 17, 18, and the coaching cycle is 2.5 years. So that's actually a good point that it would be just the scouting department too and the GMs because there's a longer leash. Um, so when, say with the Blackhawks, I know everybody was talking about Artem Levshunov versus Demidov last year, and the scouting videos were talking about how Levshunov could be Charlie McAvoy, and a lot of stuff came out like he doesn't really make mistakes on the defensive end. Do you think that was more of like a unanimous Kyle Davidson and scouting pick, or the scouting staff was just like we need a right-handed defenseman because they are so much harder to come by?
I tell you what, I don't know what it was like inside the room, but I'll tell you this: I love this kid. Like I've done some film work on Levshinov. I love him. Like, and I know the fans like him, and I think the fans drifted to Rinzel because I think Rinzel's a little bit. You see him; he's a big physical guy, and he can still skate. So I think Rinzel, you want him to be, that the prototypical. Makar's a stretch, and I don't want to put this kid in Makar, but he moves well for a big guy. And I think the Blackhawks fans loved him. But when I looked at the two defensemen head to head, again, I don't work there every day. I don't watch them every day in practice. Levshinov's special. Like I'm telling you, this kid's his ability to skate, his ability to move the puck, he defends incredibly well. And more importantly than all of those things, dude competes. Like he doesn't quit on pucks. He doesn't quit on plays in the defensive zone, and it impressed me. Like he the way he was able to track back into plays and use his speed to get plays that he couldn't make. This guy is going to be a very good player. Now he's 19. He doesn't turn 20 until the season starts next year. He's 19.
Yeah.
But I honestly I have him projected as a top pair guy. Like I think he's that exceptional. I think he could be a number one defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks.
That fires me up because we have Vlasic and Rinzel, and Artem Levshunov was kind of built different. The guy was in Michigan when it was snowing and he was biking to the stadium. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people would have taken Ubers. He didn't even know what an Uber was. This guy is so personable, you know? That was great. I would hope that he's a top pair defenseman and a number one defenseman because I think that would help out our defense and back end so much. And like you said, like we haven't Korchinski was the odd man out in that top four too. So when you are behind the bench and you hear the, a new kid coming in and he's playing his first couple games and the players are chirping him on the bench, is there something that you have to like say to or is there something that head coaches or assistant coaches or other players and leaders on the team have to do to calm down that player or take him out of that or get him in a better mindset?
It's hard. And first of all, I got to clear that up, Anthony. As I was an assistant coach, but I wasn't on the bench. I was the guy looking at the video, making the calls on the offsides and icings. But
Yeah.
I've been on
Okay.
those benches, and I've seen those discussions. And I think the hardest thing is, especially for a young player that's just starting the league, and I don't mean Bedard. I think it's different when you're Bedard and you're Celebrini because it's just different. The media attention you bring and the attention you're going to get from the other teams and the other players in the league. I do think that adjustment is incredibly different. The pressure is so much more different than another player just getting his first game, like a Rinzel, for example. People knew him, but he wasn't. He wasn't on the tip of everyone's tongue. I think for those players, I think the most important thing is just go play your game. And it's hard. The pace and speed from the American League to the National League, from college to the National League, to juniors to the National League is exceptional. Making that move, everything happens so incredibly fast. On TV, it's slow. You sit in the upper deck of an arena, it's slow. Go stand by the glass. Dude, this game is so fast. And you have to make these decisions in less than a second, and it's hard. So when you get a new player, you just want to make sure that they're playing within themselves. We always would tell guys when they're first getting into their first game, don't worry about the offense. The offense will come. Don't worry about making that pretty pass or the pretty shot. All that stuff will come. Be responsible. Be responsible in your first couple of games. That's what allows coaches to keep putting you on the ice. If you can stay on the defensive side of players, if you get good sticks and help defend passes by the opposing team, if you know where to go in the defensive zone, if you can show yourself as a defensively responsible player first, and first and foremost, you'll get an opportunity to play more even for players that are offensively gifted and those guys, because the offense takes time. Again, we talked about the speed of it. So I think it's incredibly important for those guys to just play within themselves and don't worry about making mistakes because they're going to happen. But don't overextend what you're trying to do. Just play within yourself and think defense first.
Okay, so when you're looking at a development path for a player that is a prospect, would you rather? I know that there's like the big four or in the CHL with the NCAA. So you have like the Q, the WHL, and the OHL. Is there a specific path that I think when you were coming up to when you said you were with when you had more of a role
Yeah.
before it started with scouting staff and it split, was there more of a role that teams wanted? Because I know the Q guys, everybody always talks about how it's not the best league, but they keep winning the Memorial Cup. So is there like a specific path that is better for a prospect to take in the eyes of a GM?
The answer is yes, but it's different for every player. And that's what the hard
Sure.
thing, because each of those leagues has different strengths to it. The Quebec League is known, hey, they're moving the puck, they're playing quickly. It's high end skilled guys that can play in small areas with a puck. The Western League is tougher. You're going to get a bigger, tougher, stronger guy. You're going to play those kind of competitions every night. A college guy is going to be a guy that's going to have a step ahead when you're talking about preparation and practice. Why? Because they practice more than any of those leagues. They practice Monday through Thursday. They get more time in the gym. They get more time in the classroom. So I think it really depends on the player. And I think one thing that's interesting, Anthony, is how many players you're seeing right now in this last 5 years that are coming through the NCAA, that are coming through college hockey. And some of the best players in the league right now are taking a path through the NCAA where you go back 10, 15 years, and that wasn't the case. It was every kid was coming through junior. And then you got to open up the globe. Like these guys are playing on the other side of the planet. The one thing that the internet has done and video scouting has done is there's no secrets anymore. There's no guy hiding under a rock somewhere in Western Russia or Eastern Russia that you're not going to
Yeah.
notice. Everybody knows everybody, but the path is different for each player. There are players that the NCAA is not the path. They're academically not, and just reality. They don't want to go to school anymore. That's not their path. I think for goaltenders specifically, when you look at goaltenders, when you play in college, you play 2 games a week, and I think games are important for goalies. So you look at the juniors, you're playing 3, 4, 5 games a week, and it's important to play games as a goalie. So again, it's the different person is a different path. I don't know if GMs today really look at the leagues like they used to. I think it has become so good to players that have gone through the USNDP that have gone on to play in the NCAA. That path has become tried and true. So I think if you pick an NDP kid that's gone into the NCAA, I think there's a lot of confidence in GMs that, okay, he's going to be prepared. He knows how to play the right way. But that same thing can be said from a kid playing in the Ontario League or the Western League. So yeah, the landscape has definitely changed. That I don't think GMs are going in there going, yeah, we used to think early back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was, hey, we got to get as many Western Canadian kids as we can. Those kids know how to play. They play tough. They play playoff hockey. Let's go get a bunch of Western Canadians. I don't think rosters are filled out the same way as they were back then.
That's a really awesome point. Um, Honestly, I didn't even think about the goalie aspect where if you're playing in college, it's 2 games a week because that is very true. If you go to like Michigan, if you're a goalie, you're playing 2, 3 games. Wow, that is really interesting stuff. So when we were talking about Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini, and there's been this debate amongst the two. And I don't want you to like have to break up their games if you don't want to, but is there a specific player under 23 in your mind that is the best player in the NHL? And what separates a player like Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini above the rest?
When you look at those two and compare them, it's unfortunate for Connor Bedard that he's getting the Macklin Celebrini comparisons, and they're different players. They play different style hockey games. But you also look at Connor Bedard; he's got back-to-back 20-goal seasons. He's 19. Like,
Yeah.
I think the expectations for Connor Bedard, well, he's here now. We picked him first overall. We should be in the playoffs. I think the expectations in the bar got set incredibly high for him as he joined this Blackhawk team, and I think that really hurt him. I think everybody's expecting him to be McDavid and Matthews and McKinnon go coast to coast, end to end every time he gets the puck. That's not how he plays. He's a guy that will pull the defense to him, and then he'll make that unbelievable pass to his teammate and that finisher. When you look at Macklin Celebrini, he's a bigger bodied guy. He drives to the net. He's a guy that can create on his own, and he's a guy that can get the pucks off the wall and get to the net. Different players, and I think I will say this: if you have to have just one of those two players right now, I hate to say this on guys that are talking Chicago Blackhawk fans. If you talk to the general managers of the National Hockey League right now, if you have to take one of the two, I think most of them are going to take Macklin Celebrini. And I think it is because of the bigger body guy that can do it all by himself. And he can create things and create space on his own. Having said that, Connor Bedard is going to be an all-star in this league. He's going to be a guy that's going to generate a lot, but he's going to need the players around him and the team around him to be better.
Yeah, that's a great point. Frank Saravalli said that they were having this kind of discussion on Daily Faceoff, and they said since Macklin Celebrini was playing against 22, 23, 24-year-olds in the NCAA, he was actually more ready than Connor Bedard, who was playing in the WHL, which is just an age difference between some of the players. But yeah, Macklin Celebrini is kind of a more filled out package of a 200-foot game and player that could do it all. So I love your honesty there. Can I ask you about your journey into the NHL and what was that first step that you took that you really knew that you had made it, and then you were going to have an NHL opportunity?
I tell you what, this is, and to all people out there, because I know everybody that has been involved with hockey, that's what they want to do. They want to work in the NHL. I will tell you this: well, two things: work incredibly hard and talk to as many hockey people as you can. Because I played college hockey at the University of North Dakota, a really good hockey team. I thought at some point when I was younger that I might play in the National Hockey League. But as I got older, I figured, no, I'm not quite good enough. So I had to find a different path. But I really liked the game. My dad was a coach in the not National Hockey League. My dad was a coach in NCAA. I had been in the NCAA, so I knew the game fairly well, and I wanted to be around it. So my fifth year, a lot of graduate assistants, I helped with the University of North Dakota with their video work. They needed help with their video, so I started with video, and that's back in 1989. And buddy, I was working on a VHS machine and I applied to every NHL team for a video coaching job. And back then, it was 1990 when I graduated. Most of those teams didn't even have video coaches, didn't exist. So I wanted a job that only a handful of teams had. And I had to go to a different field. I went to a different career. I got into the hotels and restaurants, and I kept wanting to get into hockey. And I worked at a hotel. Is that a long story, Anthony? I'm sorry. I worked at a hotel in Minneapolis. I love it. I worked in a hotel in Minneapolis that awarded the Hobie Baker Award. It was the Decathlon Athletic Club in Bloomington, Minnesota. I ran the hotel and the restaurant, and then I was the executive director of the Hobie Baker Award, which kept me in hockey, which kept me talking to hockey people, which kept me watching hockey games. And through that, I met Bobby Smith, who was living in Minneapolis, and I ultimately became the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes. And that relationship, I moved down to Arizona to get away from the cold and went and met with him. And he said, we don't have any jobs. You can volunteer if you want to. And a week later, the video guy quit. The video guy wanted to become a teacher. It was 2 weeks before the season started in 1997, the second year in Arizona, that there was a job open. I went and met with him 2 weeks prior. My name was in front of his mind, called me up, said, hey, do you want to be our video guy? But you got to start tomorrow. I went in the next day and I worked there for 23 years. Unbelievably fortunate path because, one, video guys didn't exist back then. So you kind of were able to create your own job. And secondly, you didn't have the competition to get the jobs. Like now, if you want to be a video guy in the NHL, one, you better work somewhere else. You got to work in juniors. You got to work in college. You're going to have to find a path. And just like players, you got to work your way up. You got to start in the USHL. You got to go to college. You got to work in the American League. Then you finally might get an opportunity in the National Hockey League as an assistant. I was incredibly lucky that the path, things fell into place. And I found what was technically my dream job. I found my dream job in 1997. I was able to make it last for a very, very long time.
That is an unbelievable story. Is there one thing that fans don't realize about coaching at the NHL level that, is there one thing that fans don't know about the coaching at the NHL level that NHL coaches do?
You know what's funny? One of my welcome to the NHL moments, we had a defenseman named Tverdovsky, a really good player in Arizona. It's my first year there. And my office was just behind the players' bench in Arizona. So you could hear the yelling and screaming on the bench. And if I popped my head out the window, I could see the ice. And I remember at the end of a period, the coach brought Tverdovsky, and this NHL player. And I mean, I was around it, but I don't know the players that well. And I don't see what's going on. I was still kind of in awe a little bit. And the coach was talking to him and telling him about his game and how to play this play like a high school coach would talk to a high school player. Mm. And at that moment, it dawned on me, oh my goodness, this is the same. This is the same that a coach would talk to a kid in Bantams, in high school, in college. Like, it's not different. It's just the players are better. So I think my big eye-opening moment, that's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Practices are the same. Meetings are incredibly similar. The style of play is incredibly similar. The way you coach them is very similar. They're just really, 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 really good players. And to find what gets the best out of each of these great players is the most difficult job of a coach in the National Hockey League.
Wow, that is really awesome. And just like finding the way that everybody gels together and handling like personalities and egos and everything. What is the hardest part about like managing a locker room or like going into a locker room after a tough loss, or do the leaders mainly are the ones that are talking, or is it like coaches or being in that room?
It depends, and it depends on the team, and it depends on the players on that team. I would expect a team when you look at a team that's filled with veterans and more experienced team like the Florida Panthers. I would imagine there's a lot of accountability within the room itself. The coaches don't need to say much. The players handle themselves. And I remember Rick Tocchet was a coach that I worked for a very long time. And what he always wanted to instill in Arizona was what they had in Pittsburgh, is where the players were the ones that had the most accountability to the other players in the room. Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Letang, their expectations of the guy sitting next to them was incredibly high. And as a coach, you want to have, and you need to have, if you're going to win, you need to have that accountability within the room. And when you have a room where the players don't care and they don't worry about the guy sitting next to them, they're only worried about the guy in their own chair, you got a problem. Because you need to have the guy next to you pull you up. You need to have the guy that say, hey, that wasn't good enough. And I'll tell you this, what's changed about the game, when you got into the early 2000s, if you weren't playing well and you had a captain like Keith Tkachuk, dude, you know it. Like you knew it in a room that, Rick Tocchet was in that room. Jeremy Roenick was in that room. It was a tough room to be around. And if you were playing poorly or making mistakes, you heard it. You can't do that anymore. Players have changed. I think the kids have changed. I don't think it could be as vocal, or you'll hear it. Hey, he's an old time hockey guy. He gave it to him. You don't hear that much anymore. You get a lot of, hey, nice job. We need to do a little better. I think that's the approach in today's game more than, hey, than the yelling and screaming. But I do think the accountability comes from the player sitting next to you more than it does the coach. But the coach's job and the communication job is incredibly important. You have to find a way to pull 20 different personalities from all over the world at all different ages and different lifestyles and pull them all together, pulling the same rope. And that's incredibly hard. And the coaches you see that can motivate players in that way, where they can get everybody on the same page, those are the guys that win. And you can have teams that are equal in talent, but the guy that knows how to push the right buttons on the right players are the guys that can help get that team above the other team and help them climb that mountain and try to win a championship in the National Hockey, the hardest trophy in all of sports to win.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How do you know if a kid is NHL ready?
Sometimes you don't. And I think you can see it. The one thing that when happens in training camp, the expectations for coaches start off before guys get on the ice. You go, okay, this guy was a high draft pick. He's going to be the guy. Or this guy was a fourth or fifth round pick. He's not ready. But then you have to get on the ice, and you don't know until you see them play. And I've seen players. Dan Winnick is one. Dan Winnick is a guy, but your listeners might not know. But Dan Winnick was a player drafted in the seventh round. A guy who doesn't have a chance. He's going to be an American leaguer. But he got on the first day of practice in training camp, and dude worked hard and he played well, and he ultimately made the team as a seventh round pick because you can't prejudge these guys. And I think what happens, management and scouts, once their draft is over, that's their Super Bowl. We drafted them, now you have to go play these guys. But the coaches need to win every game. They're just worried about tomorrow. They're not worried about 3 years from now. They're worried about tomorrow. And if player B is drafted in the fifth round, but he can help me win tomorrow, and player A is drafted in the first round and he can't, well, I want player B. Or player A, the guy, I don't care where he's drafted. I want him to play. So I do think players' paths are different. I think forwards, it's easier to come into the league as a forward because you're asked just to go jump over the boards and try to score. I think defenseman is incredibly difficult. I think defense, you're looking at a faster game. You got to learn rush reads. You got to learn defensive zone coverage. I think a development path for a defenseman takes longer. And of all of those three positions, goaltender's even longer. And again, it's about the speed and pace of the game. Goaltenders can go to the East Coast League, and goaltenders can take 5 or 6 years and take time to develop. If you're a forward, if you're taking 5 or 6 years and you're in the East Coast League, you're concerned as a guy that's been drafted in the first 3 rounds. Goalies can do that, but when they're ready, sometimes they're not. Anthony, sometimes they're not, and you got to go. Somebody's hurt. We don't have a choice. This guy's got to go in the lineup. He's got to go in the lineup. And maybe we don't think he's ready. And the Arizona Coyotes drafted Clayton Keller. Clayton Keller just turned pro right after the college season had ended, and he walked in the locker room in St. Louis, and he looked like a college player. Like he looked like a college player. He looked like a college kid. Like he was young. He was young, and he looked young, and he was small, and he was frail. And you go, oh my gosh, this guy's going to go in and play an NHL game against the St. Louis Blues, a big bruising Blues at the time, and you were feared for his life at the time. And he put him out on the game. And he was one of the top players in college hockey at the time. And he went out there, no shots on goal, no effect on the game. And I remember the coaches in the locker room, was Dave Tippett at the time, came in and said, hey, he dumped the puck in from the red line really well. And that's how hard the coaches were searching for something good to say about the player because he wasn't ready. He didn't know. He just played in the college tournament a week ago, and he got to the NHL. He wasn't ready. But you put him in that game for one reason, to have him go, oh boy, I'm not ready. And he had that awakening, like, whoa, this is big boys. And I think that really helped him over that summer prepare and work harder and understand what the level of pace, what the level of strength, what the league was really like. And I really think that helped him develop, is like a little shock factor, like, oh my goodness, I'm not ready to do this.
Yeah, like Keller is one of the best players on that team. If not the best, if when I watched him a couple years ago, when I wanted the Ducks to lose every single game to try to get Connor Bedard on the Blackhawks,
Yeah.
he was awesome. And obviously, you know, it didn't start off as the best, like you said, but like when there is rumblings or somebody is kind of getting that bust label or maybe not going to hit his potential, is there rumblings around the entire organization? And do they try to keep it quiet so that fans know or don't know about it or other teams don't know about it so that they could try to potentially trade him?
Yeah, it happens, and it happens a lot where you give up on a kid, and in some cases too soon. And it's a guy I've already mentioned, Dylan Strome. Dylan Strome's a guy because he was picked third overall behind Eichel and McDavid. I think the expectations were too high on him. I think that they expected Dylan Strome to come in and be the caliber player that a number three overall was at that time, and I think in Arizona, he played 40, just under 50 games for the Arizona Coyotes because they thought,
Yeah.
hey, he's not going to be what those guys are. He's the top centerman of the Washington Capitals right now, a team that was number one in the Eastern Conference right now, is playing important minutes on the power play on the on all situations. He's the one that feeds Alex Ovechkin the puck. Like Dylan Strome just took a little while longer, and I think your expectations on where a player is drafted clouds your mind on what that player needs to be. And Barrett Hayton's another example. I know I use a lot of Utah and Arizona references because that's what I know. Barrett Hayton was
Mhm.
drafted high in the draft, fifth overall draft pick, and Barrett Hayton, Barrett Hayton, Barrett Hayton. Barrett Hayton is a number 2, 3 centerman in the National Hockey League, plays every game. He's an effective player at his role. I think Barrett Hayton can play on a winning team, and on the best teams in hockey, he might be a number 3 center. But guess what? The winning teams that win the Stanley Cup this year need a really good number 3 center. So if you're slotted in at number 3 center, forget where you're drafted. You're done. Draft is over. Does he fit a slot in our team that helps our team play better? The answer is yes. It's a good pick. And I think sometimes when you get those players drafted so high that you set the bar so high for these kids that it makes it difficult to achieve that, and then you think they're a bust. And yes, there are players. I won't say them by name because that's not fair.
Mhm.
That yeah, you go, this guy doesn't have the foot speed we thought he has, and you've seen it. You've seen it where teams go, okay, we've got a guy that was drafted high is not playing well. You've got a guy that's drafted high not playing well. Let's you do 1-for-1 and see if the change of scenery helps. And honestly, rarely does it. And those guys, you can go through every team and every city and see, yeah, you go back at our first round draft picks over the last 10 years and go, oh yeah, that guy just wasn't quite ready. We could have picked this guy, and this guy instead. Every team in the league does that. You just can't pick it. And you said it, 17-year-olds are hard to predict.
Yeah, it's all a projection.
Yeah.
I mean, these kids are 17, 18, but Dylan Strome actually played phenomenal with Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane
Yeah.
when he was on the Blackhawks. I don't know why we gave him up for nothing. That was an incredible 1 year, $3 million signing. I believe when we got him. He just played incredible. I know everybody would say, well, we wouldn't have got Bedard, but you have no idea what would have happened. Dylan Strome is feeding Ovechkin. I mean, that is a very good point. So teams give up on their players too quickly, and I feel like they give up on their coaches too quickly. 2.5 years is the average span for a coaching hire. Or yeah. So why do you think they do get fired so quickly, or the leashes are so short?
That changed, and that changed mid 2000s. And I think when Dave Tippett was here, you looked. There was a whole season that went by when no coach got fired, and that just doesn't happen anymore. One, it's about money. It's about money, and we talk about expectations and where your fan base expects you to be, and it's easiest to replace a coach. The other thing that makes the coaching carousel speed up and go quicker is the power of the player. Because I think when you go back to the early 2000s, the players did not have the power over the coaching staff. You coaches could grind these guys. You could have 2-a-days in training camp. You could skate these guys for 3, 4 hours. Then the CBA took over, and it's a 3 hour max at the rink, not 3 hours on the ice. Three from the time I walk in the door until I leave. You've got me for 3 hours. That's it. And I think the players started to gain more power, and now the contracts are so high, and the players have so much power that they go, I'm not playing for that guy anymore. I don't like him. And so when I have my exit meetings, I'm going to go sit down across from the general manager and I go, you know what? He goes or I go. I'm making $12 million a year and you need me to win a Stanley Cup. you can replace that guy. And if you get 4, 5, 6 guys saying that same thing to the GM, I think that changes the voice of what the coach used to have. I think it's different. I don't think that's that all encompassing power that head coaches used to have. And I do think the voices of the player have become louder. And I think that's part of it. The money and the expectations to win, I think, are the other.
Yeah, for to transition this to the Stanley Cup playoffs because we are um that's where we are and there's only four teams left and you see Peter DeBoer and the Panthers head coach. I can't believe I'm forgetting
Yeah,
his name.
Paul Maurice. Yeah.
Paul Maurice, of course, yes.
Yeah.
So Paul Maurice and Peter DeBoer, they have such a long leash, and you're seeing guys that have longer leashes, they sustain success more. John Cooper is a fantastic example as well. Mike Sullivan is a fantastic example. When these guys have a longer leash, you can see more of the Stanley Cup success. So for the last, like, I only have two more questions, but
Sure.
what are your predictions for the Stanley Cup playoffs? And um, yeah, do you think it's going to be a repeat of the Oilers
Anthony,
and the Panthers?
I tell you what, I watch as much hockey as anybody. I get up in the morning and I turn on game film. I watch games every day. I'll watch them at night and I'll watch them again in the morning. And I'm wrong. Yeah, I told you I had the Tampa Bay Lightning and Colorado Avalanche in the finals, and they were both out in the first round. I still stand by those two really good teams, and they easily could be on a path to win a cup. Um, the way the Florida Panthers are playing right now, I don't see how they don't repeat. I don't. There's something special about the Florida Panthers, the way they play. We talked about the accountability in the room. I think it exists. I think Matthew Tkachuk helps drive that engine, even though he's not the captain. Barkov's a quiet leader that plays the right way. That's a team that has fun. It's a team that works incredibly hard, and they have the confidence that really is necessary to win this grueling 2-month competition. So I do think they're going to beat Carolina. The West, and I've bet against, and this is true, I have bet against the Edmonton Oilers the last 6 series that they have played. They won 5 of them. The only one they didn't win is the Stanley Cup final against the Florida Panthers. This team keeps surprising me. So this time around, I took a more objective view of the film, and they were just doing things better. They were defending better, defending the rush better. They were faster. They were deeper. And I picked them over Dallas. And when you see the first 40 minutes of the game last night, you could see why. They were just better than the Dallas Stars. And unfortunately, took a couple penalties, and that changed the game. I still like the Edmonton Oilers in this series. I do think ultimately their better players will be the ones that will out in this one. I think McDavid and Draisaitl are going to push them over, and I think we're going to get a repeat. But I don't think Edmonton could beat Florida. So I've got Florida beating Edmonton again for a repeat of last year's Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, it would be incredible to see a Canadian team win for the first time in a very long time. So when McDavid won the Conn Smythe last year, despite losing, that was just an incredible run that he had. So it would be kind of cool to see. Lightning and the Lightning and Avalanche, they are great teams. Championship pedigree. It was just very unfortunate Mikko Rantanen did what he did in those final minutes. But
Yeah.
the last question I have is Connor Bedard's contract status. I know that there are people saying that he might not want to re-sign in Chicago, which is just completely not true. But do you see him signing for the max 8 years, or do you think that he wants a shorter term contract?
That's hard. And everybody's situation is going to be different. I think with Connor Bedard, and you're going to have to get this deal done. I know he's got through the end of the year next season, but the management's going to want to sign him to the max 8. I mean, he's a guy that you drafted at number 1. He's a guy that you want to have control of. He's a guy that you want to have in your franchise when your franchise is ready to win. What I think with Connor Bedard, I think players want to win, but players also they want the money, so he's going to get a max contract. You know they're going to pay him, so he's going to get that in Chicago. Players want to win, but they also want to be comfortable. He knows the city, he knows the players, he knows the managers. He can walk in the door, he knows where he's got to take his skates to get his skate sharpened. It becomes comfortable. You know the city. You don't want to leave the city that you grew up playing this game in, and I don't mean growing up, but I mean in the National Hockey League. So yeah, and by then you're looking at all this young core that plays a certain way, that plays with speed, plays with pace, plays with excitement and skill. they're 2 years advanced. And he's going to look around and say, yeah, well, look at the score. Like, I think he's going to say, we've got the right corner. He added Spencer Knight in the back end, a goalie that you can grow with for years, who I think is elite, an exceptional goaltender. So I think he's got the young core of forwards and defense that go, you can see it. Like, you can see that there's going to be a future. So I think Connor Bedard is going to sign the max deal, and I think he's going to stay in Chicago. I don't see why everybody thinks he wants to get out. I think the Chicago Blackhawks are going to be a team to play for. It's just not going to be this year, and it's not going to be next year. But when they do win, they're going to be what they were before. They're going to be a team that's perennially in the Stanley Cup conversation because their best players are now 26, 27 years old, and they're going to be there for years. And I don't think he's ready to give up on that, because you look at the teams, where else are you going to go where you have that kind of longevity over a long period of time? They're going to be teams that are right where you're at right now, that are going to have that kind of a future where you can perennially be in the playoffs year after year. Because look what Boston is, look where New York is, Pittsburgh is there. Like, it's hard to keep that level up year after year after year, and Chicago is just on the verge of doing that. So I don't think he's going to leave.
One more question, because I just want it, like, I think this would be a fantastic clip. Just your thoughts on Frank Nazar.
He's one of those guys who plays a little different. He's a guy that plays with pace, and he plays with a little bit of jam to his game too. And I think he's a guy that I think it was a smart move. And I know there's a lot of criticism in Chicago about keeping him in the American League for as long as they did. I think it was important. I think it was important for a player like that to be able to use his skill and his speed and learn to play the game at a pace in a professional setting, where he wasn't getting pushed around, where he wasn't challenged as much as he is in the National Hockey League. I think he needed to get that success. I think he needed to have that as part of his development so that he could see that first. I think we talked about rushing players to the National Hockey League. I think by keeping Frank Nazar in the American League was a really smart decision. Now, by the end of the season, when you make that coaching change, now you've got to put that player in a situation where you've got to let him see where he sits. You've got to let him see what it's like to play in the National Hockey League, and we talked about it, where he has to get better at for the following season. I think that the bar on this guy, we talk about how he's setting the bar, I think it's high. I think his ability to get up and down the ice with pace and get through the middle of the ice the way he does is going to be a key for this team having success in the future. But I think the expectation for him at the end of this season needed to be tempered a little bit, that he is not ready for that. And even though he's getting the ice time, and even though he's getting on the ice more at the end of the season for the Chicago Blackhawks, let's just wait. I think this is just for him to experience and get a taste of what this competition is actually like in the National Hockey League.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was absolutely incredible. Like I said, you are a hockey encyclopedia, so this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I had a blast, Anthony. Anytime, man, you know where to find me.
Thank you so much.